we'll call the meeting back to order. Mary, welcome. We've been thinking of you and all our CFA friends and family down in the Florida area. Hope things are going okay with you.
It's okay here, and we've been slowly hearing from people that are down in the Fort Myers area that they're okay. That at least the Siamese breeders that I know that are down there, we've heard from that. I don't know what kind of damage they had or anything, but we've been hearing that they're okay.
Great. Well, thank you. I'm going to turn this over to you and Carol. So, Carol, do you have anything you want to start with?
I just want to make a standing motion reserving the right to vote no to approve all of the changes as presented.
Okay.
Rachel makes a standing second.
Well, thank you. That speeds things up a little bit there. Thank you both. Mary, let's go ahead and do the first one.
Okay, so the first one was requested by the awards committee. This is, they noticed that there are some definitions that were needed. The show rules talk about a couple of different catalogs, but it's not really clear in some places when they refer to the master clerk catalog what they're referring to. So we added a definition for the master clerk catalog and clarified the definition of the condensed show catalog, that it can only be used by the master clerk and can't be used by anybody else. And then there were a couple of show rules that were not in alphabetical order in the definition section. So we took this opportunity to put those in alphabetical order.
Okay. Proceed.
Oh, you don't want to vote on it?
Well, let me see if there's anybody has any questions or comments for you. This is on the first one, right, Mary?
Yes.
The 2.11.
Yes, it modifies show rules 2.11 and 6.3 and puts a couple other ones in alphabetical order.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Mary, I do have a question.
Okay.
And if I go to your third page, and you just got to correct me if I have a misunderstanding, at the bottom of your third page, I see 2.11 again.
Okay. Yeah. So I thought that you would vote on these things in order, and it's my understanding. So this was a problem of how to present this to you, because I didn't want to combine these two things all in one, but I wanted you to see the two different concepts. But then when we get to the second one, I thought you were going to vote on number 1 first, and then the second one would insert 211 above.
Okay, all right, I understand.
Okay.
That's all I had. Thank you for explaining that.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that I understood what was happening. So,
Oh yeah, I also am going to renumber these. So
okay.
that.
Very good. Does anybody have any objections to the first motion? Okay, seeing no objections, this one passes unanimously.
Okay, so the second question came from central office, that we no longer record household pets. We don't record cats, but just removing the definition of recording created problems because there's a line in that definition that needs to be in a different definition. So we moved that to the definition in the household pet class. And then we found out that, okay, there's no definition of companion cat. So we're adding a definition for companion cat and putting 2 more in alphabetical order, and then getting rid of the references to recorded in other show rules.
Okay, Melanie?
Okay, I understand this came from central office. So in a sense, I'm asking the question of them. It seems that we no longer distinguish between recording and registration, but I seem to remember a fairly in-depth discussion about the terminology of recording versus registration, and I'm wondering how this evolution occurred.
I'm going to be right back, but that is definitely a central office question.
Okay, I'll respond.
Go ahead, Ali.
Yes, at one time it was recorded. We recorded them and I'd have to look it up in the minutes, but it was probably 2, 3 years ago, maybe 4, that it was agreed that we would use the term register instead of record. And I'd have to look that up. It's been that way for a couple of years. I mean, in essence, we're registering the cats. We're not recording them, we're registering them. I think it may have come about the time when we started giving out national awards to household pets. But
Okay. Thank you, Ali. George?
I have something that's kind of half comment, half question. Did anybody run this by the household pet committee before this was done?
We did not.
Yeah. I keep getting feedback from the household pet people that they feel like their identity is being challenged, that CFA is trying to force them to call themselves companion cats instead of household pets. Now, I don't have any problem with this as written, but I would really like to see when we start making these changes involving household pets, that as just common courtesy, that the household pet committee be consulted. So I don't have any specific objection to this, but I'm going to abstain on it because I think the household pets ought to have a say in what we call them and how we treat them with CFA. If we keep talking over them and deciding what's best for them, we're not engaging the household pet people. So, you know, I can't vote yet on yes on this. I'm not going to vote no, so I'm going to abstain. But when we're doing things that involve household pets, I would really ask that in the future, we engage the household pet committee.
Pam Delabar?
I agree with George on this, using the household pet people. Companion cat means different things in different parts of the world. In some areas, it means a cat that could be pedigreed, but is able to be shown in what we would consider a household pet. They call them companion cats. And then they have another case for those. I will vote in favor of this, but I do think for future cases, we need to go through the household pet people, and because they do have a group now that we can go. I think Jenny Wickle is still in charge, if I remember correctly.
Mark?
Yeah, speaking on behalf of the marketing committee, we've had a problem with the term companion cat, and we're working with Atomic Wash, the agency that we've hired to help us with branding and the website, trying to come up with another term. I know that Desiree, who is the director of marketing, has been unhappy with companion cat from the very beginning, and I believe Aline also has concerns about the use of that. So just to say, to respond to those who are unhappy with the term companion cat, we're working on it. And we will definitely follow George's suggestion and talk to the committee, the household pet committee.
Okay. Any other comments? Mary Kay?
Yeah, is everybody else done? I want to be last.
Looks
Okay.
like it.
So the language that will be moved from the definition of a recorded cat to the definition of the registered, the definition of the household pet class, that language is already there. We did not add to 2.20. The underlined section is just moved from a different show role. So the reference to the interchangeability of companion cat and household pet was already in the show rules. We did not add that. The only real addition is the definition of companion cat. That's it. And companion cats are shown in the household pet class. So since we weren't changing anything. And since central office said they no longer record cats, that's why I didn't see a need to ask the household pet people. That language was already there.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Okay.
I'm going to call the vote on this because I believe at least one person's going to abstain. So if you're in favor of this, please raise your hand. I have Carol Krasnowski, Kenny Curley, Pam Delabar, Annette Wilson, Mark Hannon, Mike Shelton, Paula Noble, Russell Webb, Kathy Calhoun, Kathy Dunham, Yukiko Hayata, John Kalula, Rachel Anger, and Pam Mosier. Please lower your hand. If you're opposed, please raise your hand. No one is opposed. If you are an abstention, please raise your hand. Melanie Morgan and George Eigenhauser. Rachel, please call the vote.
I do not have a vote from Sharon Roy.
Is Sharon on?
I don't see her.
I don't see her either.
And she's not in the audience either.
So we have 14 yes, 0 no, 2 abstentions.
Okay. Motion passes. Mary Kay, let's go on to the third one.
Okay, number 3, if you recall in August, we added as an addendum to the current show rules that smoking includes vaping and e-cigarettes. This just puts it in the show rules for next season.
Anybody have any questions or comments? Any objections? Seeing no objections, this motion passes unanimously.
Okay, number 4.
Yes.
This was requested by Kathy Calhoun. Currently, clubs in China have a lot of leeway with licensing their shows right before the show dates, and she asked that we write something formal. And this would be an addendum. This is not for the actual show rules. This is an addendum to the existing show rules. It formalizes your current policy that they cannot license a show in less than 7 days before the opening date of the show season. It applies to this season, and if it has to be extended, it will be extended like in April. So Kathy, go ahead. Sorry, Rich, you get to call on her.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Yes, this is just making an official record in the show rules of what our common practice. We did have a conversation with the area advisors asking if they were ready to extend that from 7 days maybe to 14 days or just 30 days. But given the issues with COVID and the fact that their facilities shut down very close in, they've asked if we stay with 7 days. So this will just make it a part of the show rules as opposed to not being there.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Kathy, take time. Thank you. Any objections? Seeing no objections, this motion passes unanimously. Mary Kay?
Okay, number 5, and this was requested by Mark Hannon. This would remove the ability to license a show in less than 90 days, and this would start next season. This is not an addendum for this season. It would start next season. You see the rationale there. What it does is it takes away the ability to pay a fine and license in under 90 days. Now, this does not mean you cannot make exceptions for certain areas because you already have for China. And I wanted to make one comment about, you see the rationale there, but I wanted to make a comment about an example from economics. When groups did a study of daycare centers in Israel that allowed people to drop off their kids at the daycare center late if they, or pick them up, I'm sorry, pick them up if they paid a late fee. they thought that would inhibit people from dropping the kids off late. And what it actually did was increase the number of people dropping or picking up their kids late, because people assumed that by paying a small fine, they had permission to be late to pick up the kids. So I think what we have by having this written in the show rules that you can pay a fine and license late, we're giving people the impression that it's okay to license your show late. So that's all I want to say.
Okay, Mary. Mark?
Yeah, I want to emphasize that this does not mean you can't get an exception. There are certainly going to be reasons for exceptions. But right now, a lot of clubs are going beyond the 90 days, and it's creating problems. I mean, a lot of shows are having low entries, and part of what's contributing to it is the fact that people don't know about the shows until right before the show. If they wait until the 31st day, even if there's a penalty, it means that people don't have time to make plans. People have already made other commitments for that weekend. It may be another show. It may be something outside the cat fancy. You know, I think that whatever deadline we give them, they're going to go up to that deadline. And I don't think we want to encourage that.
Cam Delabar?
I see this as something to try to address problems within the US. There's nothing for force majeure. We're making it harder for clubs outside the US to be able to get shows on the books. We don't always have 90 days. We're lucky sometimes to get 45 days to be able to put on a show. And our upcoming show overfilled. So it's trying to address a problem punitively rather than trying to give people something affirmative to work toward. I cannot support this. This hurts my region a lot.
George?
I'm not going to support this either because I think this hurts clubs in the United States as well. There are many reasons why a club may not be able to license a show 90 days out. You know, some show halls I run into have a lower price if it's getting closer to a particular date and no one has booked the hall. So sometimes it's a cheaper show hall. Sometimes there are other reasons. If there is a problem, the problems Mark is pointing out, you know, you get poor entry, blah, 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 blah. That's part of the metric that clubs consider when deciding when to license their show. And so given a choice between us creating a rule that they have to go to the board and try to get an exception each time, I would rather trust the clubs to decide when is the appropriate time to license their show. And if it's within not the 90 days and they're willing to pay the penalty, I think we should allow it, because any harm, you know, that comes from them not getting entries because of the late licensing is on them. We are in a situation where things are still being changed. You know, some places are completely COVID rule free. They no longer have rules. Some places still have rules. CDC says that, you know, 40% of us should still be masking. There's still a lot of turbulence. And while clubs are trying to build up their shows again, coming out of the pandemic, I think we should give them as much flexibility as possible to find their own way and do what works for them. So I'd rather leave this up to the clubs.
Mike?
Yeah, I mostly just want to echo what George has said about COVID. There are still jurisdictions where show halls are very reluctant to commit up to 90 days out or 120 days out or whatever it would take to be able to commit to a show license only 90 days out. They just aren't doing it. And if a club doesn't have a commitment from a show hall, they're not going to license the show, and we've lost it entirely. It also reduces flexibility in case a club thought they were going to be putting on their traditional show and it has to go away. This reduces our flexibility to be able to have somebody get in there relatively late and put on a different show instead. I understand what you're saying, that we can always make exceptions, but if we say, well, this will be an exception, it has to go by the board, that's putting up a barrier to clubs putting on shows and trying to fill up the very few available dates we have on the schedule at a time when I think the last thing we should be doing is putting up more barriers.
Melanie?
Thank you. In theory, I actually agree with this proposal moving forward. In fact, in some ways, I think if we looked at it from a different perspective and said, let's provide incentives for clubs to say license their shows 6 months out or 9 months out, then what a great thing we would have in terms of managing our show schedule. That said, up until October 1st, which is today, we had an exception out there that basically took away any fines. And I think that when you give them an inch, they take a mile came into play here. And we've had a lot of clubs who've pushed this way far. I think this show rule proposal is, a reaction to that mile. And I would kind of like to, in my opinion, table this or move it back until we see what happens as we reinstitute our existing show rules as of October 1 with the penalties involved, which happen to be a money-making potential incentive for CFA. So Kathy should be happy. So,
John? You're on mute, John.
I basically agree with what Michael said. A lot of times I do not find out that a club decided not to put on a show till the last minute. To save a show, I have to scrounge for something. Sometimes I'm able to find something within under 90 days. Sometimes I cannot. I would not support this at all.
Kenny?
I agree with George. I'm done.
Kathy? Kathy Cajon?
Oh, yes. Okay. I cannot support this. I think it's been said before, it's a barrier. I think we need to be doing as much as we can possibly do to be flexible. So I can't support this.
Annette?
Thank you. I can see the reason for flexibility in the hopefully fairly short term. By short term, I mean midterm, maybe a year or so. However, if we don't put this in place and then give clubs a way to ask for an exception, how are we going to know what the exceptions are? We don't have any way. We're assuming things without actually knowing why a club might be licensing late. And I think that would be important information to know. And then we could also track when that starts to get better. So I'm kind of torn on this.
Pam Delabar?
One of the reasons that the clubs could possibly be licensing less than 90 days out is the availability of judges. And Melanie can tell you, we had 2 judges at our show, our regional show 2 weeks ago that took them 32 hours to be able to get to the show, or to Belgium to be able to judge the show. Sometimes it's judges, sometimes it is the facility. And we've had a great deal of problems with facilities here in Europe. And I'm not even going to mention the 2 biggies that are stopping travel and judges. But this is a barrier. Putting this in, it's a barrier to the clubs in my area. And I know when they've got problems, I know why they've got problems, because they're coming to me for resolution. And I see no reason why we have to keep coming to the board for exceptions to this, exceptions to that, when we don't have to. Let us try to direct our regions and do everything we can to help these clubs put on shows.
Okay. Mark, you have some responses to the comments or questions? Okay, I will call I'm going to call the vote. If you are in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. I have Mark Hannon. Please lower your hand. If you are opposed to this motion, please raise your hand. I have George Eigenhauser Melanie Morgan, Pam Delabar, Paula Noble, Russell Webb, Mike Shelton, Kenny Curley, Carol Krasnowski, John Kalula, Kathy Dunham, Yukiko Hayata, Sharon Roy, Kathy Calhoun, Annette Wilson. Please, Pam Mosier. Please lower your hand. If you are an abstention, please raise your hand. I see no abstentions. Rachel, please call the vote.
I was a no vote on that, by the way. That was 1 yes, 16 no, 0 abstentions.
Okay, this motion fails. Okay,
Okay, next,
Meredith?
number 6 is from Pam Delabar on behalf of the Judges Association. This is basically a 5-cent per cat increase per judge across the board, except for like the best of the best gets for premiership gets increased. Anyhow, I just have a quick comment. I don't begrudge judges a small raise. I want to let you know though some statistics. Remember that most shows are 8 to 10 rings. Let's take last season's Cotton States show. That was one of our biggest shows. Cotton States had 316 entries and 8 rings. If this passed, that would be a $126 increase for them. Most show, now that's the high end. Most shows will see an increase of, I predict, from $50 to $75. So that's all I wanted to let you know.
Okay, George.
Let me start by saying I agree with everything in the rationale, but I'm going to vote no anyway. One of the problems we have is that we didn't engage the show producing clubs when we passed this. Yes, it's been forever since the judges have had a raise. Yes, that's a really tiny raise, you know, in the grand scheme of things. You know, yes, inflation is going crazy right now, but this is the kind of thing I would rather see brought forward as a resolution at the annual, so that the clubs who are actually going to be paying these fees have a say in the decision. Some things I think the board needs to take up on their own. Some things I think are best left to the delegation. This is something that, while I support the motion itself, I find fault with the procedure because I'd rather see this go before the delegation, and I'm going to be voting no because of that.
Pam Delabar.
Excuse me, if this went towards a delegation, we would be coming in like we did the last time, 17 years ago, asking for a 25-cent raise prorated over 5 years, which is basically 5 cents a year. I thought it would show a little bit of support on the board's part to help the judges with a minimum 5-cent raise. Now, as for shows put, you know, with costs of judges and everything, when I am working with clubs on putting on shows, especially with new shows, they're saying 8 rings or 6 by 6, and I'm saying, no, you guys cannot afford it. They need to look at, let's look at our 6-ring shows, or let's go back to our 4 by 4s or whatever like that. Let's try to be able to afford what we're putting on. And thanks to CFA sponsorship programs that we're able to get a little help in where we're putting on our shows, because no other association pays their clubs to put on shows. What we're asking for is a minute little help in getting just a bit more money for our work. Remember that judges are independent contractors licensed by CFA.
Anybody else have any questions or comments before I call the vote? Okay, I'm going to call the vote. If you are in favor of this motion, raise your hand. Pam Delabar, Mike Shelton, John Klola, Kathy Dunham. Lower your hand. John, lower your hand. If you are opposed, raise your hand. Mark Hannon, George Eigenhauser, Carol Krasnowski, Paula Noble. Lower your hand. If you are an abstention, raise your hand. Melanie Morgan, Rachel Anger, Russell Webb, Yukiko Hayata, Pam Mosier, Annette Wilson, Sharon Roy, Kenny Curley, Kathy Calhoun. Lower your hand.
Looks like
Rachel?
abstention, looks like abstention wins again.
Rachel, you call the vote?
That's 4 yes, 4 no, 9 abstentions.
Well, how does the chair break the tie?
So before the chair breaks a tie, Shelley, I have a question for you.
Okay,
The judges who voted yes or no, is there any conflict of interest with their vote?
yes. I was thinking about that and weighing it, but yes, I agree that there is a conflict of interest if you are a judge.
Pam Delabar?
I thought of that after I voted yes. I wanted to support the JA in their efforts, but I should be and must be an abstention.
John Kalula? You're on mute, John.
I have to abstain too. I just thought that's part of cost of doing business.
Okay. Rachel? Will you recall the vote?
That's 2 yes, 4 no, 11 abstentions. That's not right.
Yes, that's right.
That's correct. Okay, good.
And you all thought you were going to get me to vote on this, huh? I was paying attention. Thank you, Shelley.
I
Thank you,
think-
John and Pam.
I think this is probably the biggest number of abstentions I've ever seen on a vote.
Pam Mosier?
I might make the suggestion, like George said, that this should come up before the delegation. I think that would be the best way to proceed with this. That way, because I think your rationale is correct. So leave it up to the delegation to think that a 5 cents a raise is just too much for clubs to be able to afford.
Pam Delabar?
Just very quickly to let the rest of the board know, Pam, you weren't at the annual meeting for the JA on all the discussion that went over this. When I put that CFA is on the lower end of the scale, and that's not counting our friends in Australia and New Zealand, FIFA pays their people the equivalent basically of $100 a day for judging their 2-day shows. When you're judging for WCF, that's also like $100 a day. If you only do 40 cats traditionally, that's writing out the reports per day, but it doesn't count in all the cats you judge on their ring judging. The same thing with the World Organization of Cats. They do the same, plus you're getting extra for those ring judging. What is the extra? It's an extra €2 or $2 a cat. So at these shows of 150 cats, it is not unusual to come back with $500 for a weekend. So that's what we are doing. What we're trying to do is a 5 cent raise just to come up a little, because we are at the lower end of the scale on the remuneration given to judges for their weekends.
Okay, Pam, thank you for the information. Pam, maybe you present something for the board in December or February to bring this as a board sponsor motion to the delegation for June.
Rich, I did this on behalf of the Judges Association. It'll have to go back through them.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Mary Kay, we're back to you, number 7.
Okay, I just wanted to say, Pam, if they do present that, if they want to present that as a show rule, just let me know and I can get you statistics on that, like what the average is going to be, things like that, how it's going to pan out for clubs. Number 7, this is Kathy Dunham mentioned this in her report for the awards committee. This is adding a show rule 104 that ties exhibitors to the code of ethics. And I included all the show rules in that section so that you could see that it kind of parallels the wording, because like the first one says that people are expected to adhere to local regulations. So they're also expected to adhere to the code of ethics. And I want to remind everybody that when it's on the website, link to webpage will be the actual link to the code of ethics.
Okay, any questions or comments on number 7? Any objections to number 7? Seeing no objections, this motion passes unanimously. Number 8.
Number 8. I tend to have concerns about number 8 because I don't think it's necessary. We have the code of ethics, which you just tied to the show rules. I don't think it's necessary, but whatever.
Okay, thank you. Annette?
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is overbroad, just like the original code of ethics was a little overbroad. A couple of things. It says anyone participating in a CFA show, and I think it should say specifically at a CFA show. And I looked up definitions of sportsmanship and poor sportsmanship online to kind of get some idea of why this was bothering me. Telling someone their mother wears army boots or something like that. Relate to the or family members that, you know what, that's bad behavior. And it's certainly rude. I don't know that it goes to sportsmanship. And I think we need to be a little bit careful. Poor sportsmanship is breaking the rules or cheating. It's participating with disrespect, but it really means during the competition. So, those football players that take the computer tablet with the playbook and throw it on the ground and break it, that's poor sportsmanship because they're mad about something. But if they, as they're leaving the field, if they're talking to their friend and someone overhears it and they're saying, something bad about someone, that's gossip. I think we have to be careful here, or we're going to have a whole spate of he said, she said, and people taking offense, and maybe rightly so, but I don't think it's poor sportsmanship. Thank you.
Rachel?
Thank you for all the reasons Annette just listed. I think we're crossing over a line by not a little, but by a lot on what we expect from our exhibitors. This is going to make people not want to show their cats. They're going to be afraid they're going to say or do something that offends somebody, and then they're going to be protested. And not that some actions don't deserve that, but those are things we should handle on a case-by-case basis. This is just overreaching, in my opinion. And even though the words are there, that is not going to stop the worst offenders from doing this. So I think our show rules speak for themselves in what 1.03 already says. Thank you.
George?
And in addition to the previous comments, I don't think this really defines unsportsmanlike conduct. What it's defining is harassment. Just because you're not intimidating somebody doesn't mean you're acting in a sportsmanlike manner. Just because you're not making rude remarks doesn't mean you're acting in a sportsmanlike manner. So if you take this in the negative, to see what sportsmanlike conduct should look like, this is way too focused on harassment and intimidation and not the general principles of good sportsmanship. So I just don't think it's the right kind of language to use here.
Okay. Kathy Dunham or Mary Kay? Go ahead, Mary Kay.
Well, if Kathy has something to say, let Kathy go.
Kathy Dunham?
Yeah, this is just an extension of what the previous committee that we are now following up on recommendations started and had proposed at the annual. Now that we have a code of conduct that we have tied to the show rules, I would just like to withdraw 1.03.
Okay, Rachel, did you make a standing second? I'm trying to remember who did the standing second.
I did,
Okay, Rachel, are you in agreement with withdrawing this?
yes.
Okay.
And I am as well. This is Carol, since I made the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, right. Carol, you made the motion. All right, so this is withdrawn. Thank you. Okay, Mary Kay, on to number 10.
No, number 9.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Number 9,
so
you're right.
number 9, we have show rule 6.34, which is our count manipulation show rule. And in the current language, it only has one example of count manipulation, paying for another exhibitor's entries. There was an attempt to add a lot more examples at the annual that failed, but we've narrowed it down to, or the awards committee has narrowed it down to adding 3 examples. Manipulating the count by paying for others, offering to pay for others' entries, encouraging other exhibitors to withhold their cats, or entering cats under multiple names. Now, all 3 of those are very obvious and they're very egregious examples of count manipulation. This is different from what was presented at the annual, because the things that could be, they could go one way or another are not here. So these are all egregious examples, and that's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Comments? Questions? Shelley?
So my only question is in the final sentence that is proposed that says, see the exhibitor's code of ethics for more detail on sportsmanlike behavior, link to web page. I just want to make sure that that is accurate for what, that you have the exhibitor's code of ethics that does address what is said there.
That's a Kathy question.
I believe we do. The code of ethics was just passed in my previous report. And I think it does address those examples. I did have Mary Kay read the code of ethics before we finished this wording. So I think we have covered it.
Kathy, specific to sportsmanlike behavior?
Let me go back up and look at the report again.
That's why I wondered if you wanted to say on sportsmanlike behavior and not just say, see the exhibitor's code of ethics for more detail.
Can I comment, Rich?
Go ahead, Mary Kay.
I like Shelley's suggestion. I think we should amend that to see the exhibitor's code of ethics.
Yep, I am fine with that correction.
Okay.
So,
All right, we need to know, Rachel and I need to know the specifics on what the change is, and then I've got to get the approval from Carol and then Rachel. So what are the specifics? What are we specifically taking out and putting in?
I would suggest that we take out the words for more detail on sportsmanlike behavior.
And I agree.
And I agree. This is Carol.
And we're not adding anything else, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and Carol, you said you're in agreement?
Yes, I am.
And Rachel, you're in agreement?
I am, thank you.
Okay, very good. Any other questions or comments? Are there any objections to the change and the amended change? Seeing no objections, this passes unanimously. Okay, Mary Kay, number 10.
Okay, number 10, I received this like 2 days before my report was due, and that's why I don't have data for you in the reports. Over the past week, while I was not watching storm trackers and weather reports, I did pull a few statistics for you. I have a file from James at central office that has every entry at every show last season and whether the entry was present. I have this file because I'm helping Mark with the yearbook article on the seasonal statistics. The current point minimums required for national wins in each class in regions 1 through 9 and China, kitten 1,400. That works out to be a 35 ring point average. Championship 4,000. That works out to be a 40 ring point average. Premiership 2,000. That works out to be a 20 ring point average. Household pets 750 points and 75 rings works out to a 10-point RPA. For China, we have the same values. For the international area, it's lower. They have a lower number of rings required. They don't have 100 rings required, but what they have to do as far as ring point averages are the same. Now, these values are all lower than what we had prior to the pandemic. So every year around this time, we have people panicking that they think we won't have 25 cats, or more specifically, they worry about kittens making it over the point minimum. And this is always premature because the best counts come in the second half of the season. And prime kitten season is October through December, but we don't have to guess. We can look at actual data. In the kitten class last season, we had 6 shows that had enough entries for top 15 finals. 3 of those were in the US, and they were all in the southern region from November to December. With only 3 high count kitten shows, we still managed to have a full complement of kitten national winners. In Premiership last season, we had just 9 shows that achieved top 15. 6 of them were in Region 7. We still had 25 Premiership national winners. In Championship, we had 37 shows with top 15. 26 of those were in the last 4 months of the season. Some of those were seriously inflated from national win campaigns, but we always see higher counts in the last 4 months because of the kittens that age out and move to the adult classes. So for this season, I found so far, now remember, last season we only had 3 shows in November and December that had 75 or more kittens entered. So far, we've had 3 shows in August, and we actually have 1 today in regions 4 and regions 1. So we're already up on what we're expected. This is much earlier than last season to have those high kitten counts, and they're in 2 different regions than last season. We have several shows coming up that traditionally have high kitten counts. So we're just now coming into the prime part of the season for kitten counts. Comparing present counts from shows so far this season to last season, I'm talking about present counts. The counts are in the same range, give or take a few. I'll give you just one example. The Garden State show in Region 1 in July, and it's a bellwether show on whether or not we're going to have, decent counts. Last season, that was a regional show. It was a 6x6. The present kitten count was 46 and 48. This season, it was the Garden State show, same weekend, 6x6, 44 and 41. So that's only difference of a couple few. The point minimums for kittens is 1,400, which requires a 35 ring point average. So far, we've had 13 shows in the United States that are over 35 kittens present. And we've had more outside the United States. Typically, the better kitten counts occur in October through December, so it's premature to say that the counts are worse this year than last year, especially since we've already had some shows hitting top 15 status in the kitten class. In Championship and Premiership, the counts always improve in the second half. And as Monty Phillips used to say, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate all the work that he has done on the show rules committee in the past, having to do it now. In a year-long campaign, you spend the first 6 months finding out which judges like your cat, but all of your points come from the second half of the season. When kittens age out, they move to the adult classes and increase those counts. I was part of the committee back in 2016 that developed the plan to separate the national wins. Rich, you were on that committee, Mark, Carol, and Monty Phillips. And what was proposed at that time from the clubs was something similar. They wanted to separate us into areas, but have a minimum number of rings required. And instead we went with a minimum number of points. And the problem was the lack of competition in some classes in the international area, in particular premiership and household pets. We believed, as the board did at the time, that it was not fair that you could achieve a national win in the regions. To do that, you had to go to many shows every weekend. The competition is strong, and in some of the classes and in other areas, in the international area in China, it's weak in others, yet they'd get the same title. So I just wanted to give you an example. Without the point minimums, we would have had last season, we would have had national winners with just 4 rings of competition in premiership. 19 of the 25 cats in premiership in the international division had 20 or fewer rings, and 2 of them had less than 100 points. So while it takes a great deal of competition here, it takes very little competition in the international area. That's why we have the point minimums. So I'll just let that go. I won't give you any other statistics, but I have lots more examples of where we would be awarding national wins to cats that go to 1 or 2 shows. And actually, we would be awarding national wins to cats that are not eligible to get divisional wins. If we remove the point minimums, we'd be giving 25 national wins in every class all over the world. And there are some cats that would get national wins that do not have a point minimum to get a divisional win. So removing the point minimums across the board is a drastic measure, especially to take it in the middle of the season. Reducing the point minimums by a couple hundred would be a more measured step. But if the board really wants to remove the point minimums, my suggestion is that you let us come back with a plan for you to do it in a way starting next season that is more measured and doesn't hand out national wins like candy.
Thank you, Mary. Kathy? Calhoun?
Thank you. Thank you. That was a lot of information, Mary, and I won't pretend to have written it all down, but I do have a question as you started out. With championship, what did you start out with the point?
Current point minimum
was?
Let me bring that back up. Hang on. The current point minimum in championship is 4,000, which requires you to have a 40-point ring point average.
Okay. So 40 for kittens and 20 for premiership and 10 for household pets?
For kittens, you have to have a 35-point ring point average.
Okay.
For premiership, it's 20 and 10 for household pets.
Okay, and then you went on to talk about China.
What did I say about China?
I thought you said they were the same, but I'm sure.
Oh, yes.
That's not what
you voted to make China the same as the regions. The only difference
is the vote. Okay.
Yeah, the only difference is the international area has fewer rings. They can get a national win with 50 rings. They're only scored for 50.
Okay. So my point would be that in the international division and in China, this continues to be a very, very challenging year for shows, period, and rings, period. With COVID and the severe restrictions in China, there's a huge difficulty in having shows. We're losing ground because there are other associations that are in China that can have larger shows and more rings and have judges, and they have they're not nearly as competitive as we are. Not that I think that we should lower our standards, by no means, but I think we do need to have some accommodation. I'm not necessarily in favor of no minimum for national wins. I am in favor of the second portion of this with the region and the ID divisions to be able to address what those minimums might be. But I think from the China and the ID perspective, we need to do something, and I don't think we can wait until next year. We're losing ground now.
Melanie?
Thank you. I was one of the people that actually brought this to the awards committee, and which is kind of surprising given my long-standing stance on minimums and integrity of awards. A national title should not be easy to achieve. I totally agree with that. I appreciate the information that Mary brought to us. I brought this to the awards committee with concerns about the minimums for this year because so many people had come to me while I was out exhibiting and or judging. And it was in response to that cry from our exhibitors that I brought it up. However, the way that this is currently written, I can't support it because Mary's absolutely right. Without making adjustments for different areas and geographical regions of the world, we could potentially, well, we could very well have, you know, a full 25 contingent in regions 1 through 7 or 1 through 9. We could have people getting national titles when they hadn't qualified for their minimums in their division. So I agree with Kathy 100%. In order to make things viable in those areas that are challenged by our COVID restrictions and the shutdowns and travel and the fact that they have specialty only rings, we need to relook at things. I'm not a big advocate for changing things midstream in the middle of a season, but in this particular instance, I don't think we have a choice. And I'm hoping that perhaps we can at least bring something back to address that at our next meeting. Thank you.
Mark?
In my recollection, last season, China had one national winner. It was Best Cat in Championship. And the only way it got that was by flying over the United States and being here for several months and picking up points here. Had the cat not left China, there would not have been national winners in China last year because nobody made the minimum. Part of that is because we're having all specialty rings, the shows are smaller, what have you. I'm all in favor of lowering the minimums. I'm not in favor of doing away with top 20 with any minimums and just handing out top 25.
Okay, thank you. Kathy Dunham, do you have any comments from the awards committee on the?
Because this was brought to us by Melanie and exhibitors, what I would propose to do is to withdraw this for this particular meeting to be brought back in December. And I would hope that Kathy Calhoun and her committee would join us as well as Melanie, if she would like to,
Yes, we will.
to work out the numbers and present something in December.
So Kathy, if you're going to work on this with Kathy Calhoun and Melanie, please also work with Mary Kay and
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
do that well in advance so she can prepare something for the board. Carol and Rachel, are you in agreement to withdraw this?
Carol is a yes.
Rachel's a
Rachel?
yes.
Okay, Mary Kay, do we have to talk any more about this one since it's withdrawn?
Nope. Sorry,
Okay.
I'll lower my hand. Sorry.
No, you're fine. So here's what we got. I have 229 and we've got 230 for central office. Unfortunately, we're gonna have to do show rules. It looks like it's on the schedule for tomorrow. The reason why we have to stick to the schedule is we have a 3:30 appeal hearing that we do not want to be late for. I think there's people lined up to attend. So Mary Kay, I want to thank you for what you've done on this, and Carol, you as well. We're going to have to stop this now and move into our 2:30 agenda item. Pam Delabar.
Rich, the rest of these that were passed by 2/3 at the annual meeting, all we do is ratify. So it's sort of like, this is it, we ratify it and go on. That should go quickly.
But there are others that weren't passed by 2/3 that we are going to have to discuss.
There's only 2 that were passed by 2/3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I just know from experience, we have a tendency, we can fall down a rabbit hole and we lose a lot of time. So let's go on to central office. And that's Aline.
So just so I understand, you don't need me anymore today.
Well, I don't.
I mean, I want to go take the dog for a walk.
I don't think so, Mary Kay.
Okay.
You can walk the dog and then we'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Ollie.
Okay. I don't have many action items. If anybody has any questions on what I've written, just let me know. The first item. Oh. John, I guess, did.
John, do you have a question for Aline?
You're on mute, John.
No, I pushed a button by accident, sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Aline.
The scan show documents, what we'll start doing is sending out a document to all licensed shows that should they choose to send us scan documents versus mailing them, that these are the parameters and the guidelines they should follow. And this is based on ones we've already gotten, what needs to be done. We've gotten some very good packages. And hopefully, if people choose to do this, they can. We are telling them up front, it will take approximately 2 to 3 hours to scan, provide a good PDF. They'll need a professional scanner with auto sheet feed. If they don't have that, it's going to take them even longer. So we think that it's important clubs have a pretty good idea up front of the amount of time it will take them. So if there's no questions on that, we'll start sending that out to the clubs. Let's see. I think everybody's familiar with the NCR carbonless paper. We used to have pin feed, now it's mostly laser fed, and we are doing away with the pin feed because nobody uses it anymore. And it is pretty pricey to get because it's not a standard item any longer. So we do have a little bit in stock, but we're doing away with it. Just to let you know, we did get the National Word Rosettes. They are being sorted. Many of them have been shipped, and we should be able to finish shipping them by next week. As an aside, we have ongoing issues with getting anything into China. We shipped out trophies at the end of July. We do track them. The last information we've gotten is that they're stuck somewhere in China as of the beginning of August. So I don't know how the postal system works in China. We send it out, and then once it gets to its country, we have no control. We don't even have any further tracking. But we do know that no one has received anything either. So I don't know if it has to do with COVID or a shutdown. And but anyway, I just want to let you know that we are keeping a watch on that.
Kathy Calhoun, you got a question for Aline?
I was just going to offer assistance if the committee with people that are in China can maybe help do, I don't know what they can maybe be able to do to help, but be more than willing to try.
Okay, if we're not sending anything to China at this point until we see that those are starting to be delivered.
Yeah, that's what I thought I understood, that it's kind of getting there and it's like lost in China, like lost in, so maybe someone from China would have a better idea of what it can, find out what the hangups are and
great.
help to move it along. So let's talk offline.
Okay. Show flyers. Submitting a show flyer or not has not been actively monitored by the central office ever since I've been with CFA. So things have changed over the years, but there is a show rule that states that a show flyer must be provided 90 days prior to the date of the show or when the show is licensed. If the board wishes for the central office to start monitoring this, what I'm asking or enforce that a show flyer be submitted, what I'm asking is that there be some penalty or a disincentive if the show flyer is not submitted. I guess my feeling is if the show rule says you must do it, and we're going to take the time, which it will take time to monitor this, if a show doesn't do it, then if there is no penalty, then why would we even be doing this? So my action item is to enforce the deadline to submit a show flyer, and should a club not do it, there'd be $100 penalty to apply to the show. And no further show licenses would be approved until the penalty is paid. I'm not.
Rachel makes that motion.
Melanie seconds.
All right, who made the motion?
Rachel,
Thank you, Rachel. Melanie, you seconded it?
Yes.
Okay, Annette?
Thank you. This is something that has bugged me for a long time. When you're looking through the schedule of the shows and it says no flyer submitted, sometimes it's a foreign show, sometimes it's a US show. I'm not so sure the answer is penalizing them financially. I used an example when I talked to Eileen about it, that when a club neglected to ask for permission to schedule a guest judge, you know, then we'd say, oh, okay, but next time you can't have a guest judge. And that seemed to work. We got pretty good compliance. But that's a little bit different than a financial penalty. What I was wondering is, you know, there's a lot of boilerplate in a flyer, and central office has done a really nice job of setting up forms that are fillable online. In fact, I think there's actually a place on that show calendar where a club can enter the information about their show. Wouldn't it be easier than to just have the club fill out the information that would put together a flyer that maybe it wouldn't look cute, it wouldn't have drawings on it and so on, but it would provide all of the required information, and that would be the show flyer on that list. And then if club wants to upload something spiffier, they could. I guess I'd rather see a way to make it easier for clubs to comply with this before we start, you know, handing out money. Now, a way to maybe bring the attention to the clubs to this would be if in each central office report could be included a list of the clubs that didn't comply with the requirement, and, you know, sort of like shaming them, not in a mean way, but just listing them like these clubs did not comply with this requirement. And maybe we could get that list smaller and smaller. Just an idea. I'm done.
Melanie?
Thank you. I really like Annette's idea of having a fillable form with the option to, you know, substitute that with an official fancy flyer. That said, I actually support putting a penalty in here. If you have a show rule that says that it should be done, then there should be repercussions if you don't. And this nicely, clearly spells it out. One of the reasons I was happy to see this here is this is an item that I get a lot of really disgruntled exhibitor comments about throughout the year. Well, our club had to do this. You know, I'm trying to find information on this, that, and the other. Why aren't they doing it? There's a show rule for it. So we're blatantly disregarding our own rules. And all Eileen is asking for is a little bit of support for those and to put a little bit of muscle behind the words. I think this is a good incentive to get them to do what they need to do. And we can also incorporate Annette's idea, which I really like.
Kathy Calhoun?
I like Annette's idea. I think that that's a great compromise. And it's surprisingly enough, I am against, as the treasurer, the $100 penalty. I think that clubs are struggling enough. Their lower counts, higher airfares, higher hotels, food costs more, everything costs more. And $100 is a lot of money for not providing a flyer, which really the flyer benefits the club. You know, but it's advertising. It benefits the club. If they don't do it, they're already going to have a penalty of maybe people not knowing where their show is and choosing to go someplace else. So I really like providing a tool that they can fill out, the clubs can fill out and with the proper information, but I cannot support a penalty.
George?
The flyer doesn't just benefit the exhibitors. Not putting up a flyer can be a way to make sure only the exhibitors you want have knowledge of the show and are able to enter. Not putting up a flyer facilitates count manipulation and playing games. I agree with Melanie. we need the penalty here. I agree with Annette that giving them an alternate way to do it would be a great idea, but we have to start somewhere. And so I think we need to start with the penalty and then follow up on Annette's suggestion and give them an alternate way to do it. But if people aren't going to do it, they're not going to do it, whether we do it as a show flyer or we do it as a fill in the blank form, unless we put some teeth in it. And putting some teeth in it will help prevent some manipulation, some favoritism that can be obtained by withholding your show flyer.
Pam Delabar.
Remember that the show flyer has to be in English. So sometimes it takes some of the clubs a little while to get something translated from their language of their country over into the English flyer. I think that the online flyer that Annette came up with is excellent idea. In fact, I've just already gotten feedback from one of my clubs saying, oh, please do this. But the other thing is if somebody is not complying with the show rule and providing the flyer, let the regional director know. I'm more than willing to follow up and provide a little incentive for them to get all the little boxes checked and everything in on time.
Kathy Calhoun.
I'm slightly confused here because the show flyer does not prevent the show information from being on the CFA website. When the show is licensed, the information is there about the show. But I'm looking at one right now that doesn't have a show flyer. The judges, the ring type, the city, the region. So the flyer does not prevent or does not hold back communication about the show, whether it's there or it's not there. The information is still on the CFA website.
Aline.
Just a couple of comments. I wasn't aware that a show flyer had to be in English. I've seen show flyers in Chinese. We never really get an English version, so I didn't know that was a requirement. Maybe it is, but that does seem to be a burden for clubs. And not that this matters, but from the central office perspective, if there's a show flyer or not, doesn't matter. We have the information, as Kathy pointed out. It's all there. So it's, I'm bringing this forward because I've been asked to, not because I thought that it should be. And then the last thing would be, are you talking about a fillable form instead of a show flyer? So clubs would be able to just fill out the form, which is essentially what they're doing now through the website, because it says, click here to enter show information.
Annette, you want to answer Eileen's question?
Yeah. Well, what's missing on the thing right now is which day judges are judging, and what's missing is what the fees are. So there is information that's missing. It's not a show flyer. What's there? We have requirements online what the show flyer has to include. And if you had a fillable form that would include the boilerplate, the little, whatever, all the little stuff that goes at the bottom of the show flyer, that's standard wording from the show rules. That could just fill in. And then you already have a place for the show secretary online to put in the dates of the show. But not everything is on that little on that little thing. We don't know if it's a 2-day show, we don't know which judges are judging which day and so on. So that's what I mean by it. It would produce a very basic show flyer with all of what's required by the show rule.
I get it.
Okay, and the other thing I wanted to mention is instead of the penalty, part of the penalty, I don't care about the money. I'm fine with a dollar penalty, but we just took away. Well, no, we have a penalty if clubs don't license before 90 days. I'd rather see a club that refuses to comply not being able to get the CFA incentive money for their next show instead of not being able to license the show at all. That's a penalty. I'm done.
Kathy, Do you have, Kathy Calhoun, do you have anything else? Because I see your hands up.
I know, I do, but I've had 2 turns. I'll take it down.
Oh, okay. Arlene, did you have more?
Yeah.
Okay. Pam Delabar?
I was going to correct myself about the English. The clubs here, because of so many different languages being spoken, try to get everything out in English as it is the default language over here for CFA. But the fillable form, I think that Annette has just talked about is absolutely the way to go to get the information out, especially on the website. Now, if you get in a flyer in a native language that you're not particularly used to seeing, you don't know if you're getting the whole thing or not anyway. So I think it behooves us to have this fillable form.
Mark?
Yeah, I strongly suspect this is brought forward because of my multiple complaints to Aline about not enforcing the show rule. While I like the idea of the fillable form, and I'm hoping that it will be in multiple languages so that somebody in another country understands this is where you want the judges listed or whatever, the club still might not do it. We need some way to enforce either submitting a flyer or filling out this online fillable form. One of the things I've suggested to Aline is if the current rule is if you license the show 90 days or less prior to the show, you have to include the flyer. The penalty we could use for those is we're not going to license your show until we get the flyer. That's it.
Okay. Any other comments? Aline?
I only want to say regarding Mark's last statement, do we unlicense shows that don't send us the show flyer within 30 days of the show? That would be my only concern about having something like that. I think a monetary penalty is just the easiest to enforce. We don't have to keep track of what they did for a show, what they can do for their next show. Can we give them the sponsorship? Can we, there's just so many parameters. There's a penalty. Everybody knows what it is. It's easy to follow. We enforce it. It does not affect necessarily the first show, but they can't license any further shows.
Okay. Matthew Wong?
Hi, how about $50 instead of 100? Because I can definitely see, as Kathy said, someone in Asia is going to fail this.
I'm fine with 50.
A lot of great information and suggestions have come of this. I'm going to call the motion and we'll see what happens. And if it fails, then go back to the drawing boards, because I think there's a lot of suggestions that were made that could be incorporated. So if you're in favor of the motion made by Rachel, second by Melanie, raise your hand. Okay, I have Melanie Morgan, George Eigenhauser, Mark Hannon, Pam Mosier, Annette Wilson, Rachel Anger, Carol Kuznowski, Mike Shelton, John Kalila, Yukiko Hayata. Lower your hand. If you are opposed, raise your hand. I have Kenny Curley, Russell Webb, Kathy Calhoun, Paula Noble, Kathy Dunham. Lower your hand. If you are an abstention, raise your hand. Pam Delabar. Rachel, please call the vote.
And I am still not showing a vote for Sharon Roy. So I have 10 yes, 5 no, 1 abstention.
Okay, the motion passes. I did see Sharon was on, but now I don't see that she's with us here.
She was in, she dropped off. I just see she's in the audience and I'm trying to promote her to panelist.
Okay.
So I just, Thank you. And I just want to point out that this penalty would be effective with the 2023-2024 season. So it's not something we will be doing immediately. And also in the interim, we will create that web form, which could take the place of a show flyer. So hopefully when it is time to enforce this, it's even easier for a club to submit the necessary information.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. Kenny?
Sharon just texted me. She's waiting to get promoted.
And she's back in the meeting.
Okay, good.
Okay, great. Thank you. I've got 2:51 on our schedule. It says we need to take a break at 2:50. Let's take a 10-minute break and be back at 3:01. We're gonna go back to Aline to finish up her report. Aline, before you go back to your report, is Sharon still having trouble?
Let's see.
I don't see her anymore.
No, I don't. Let me see if, and she has not come back into the audience either.
Okay, very good. Go ahead and continue with your report.
Okay, clicker voting. And we've talked about this before, and I'm just making it a little bit more formal, that there, especially after this past annual meeting, it seems that delegates continue to, they want to make the voting for amendments and resolutions easier and more accurate. We've determined that a self-contained system for clicker voting at the annual meeting is a realistic option. Although the initial purchase price is relatively high, we estimate the equipment would be usable for at least 5 years. So it really brings down the per year price. If we were to try and do voting online as we did in 2021 at the virtual annual, with the confirmations emailed to the club secretary president, that cost would be between $5,000 and $10,000 per year because of the Wi-Fi availability that would have to be in the meeting room. So when you compare that cost to a per year price of no more than $3,000, it seems to us that the self-contained system is a better option. So, and I've outlined here the basics with the self-contained system. When I say self-contained, we have the equipment, we would administrate it. It would all, you wouldn't need a Wi-Fi signal or anything like that. It would be very easy for delegates to use. Delegates will get 1 or 2 clickers depending on how many votes they have. So instead of 1 or 2 hands, you have 1 or 2 clickers. We would be able to open and close the recording on just as we did for the annual meeting, the virtual. Immediate voting results will be available, and we will be able to record how each clicker club delegate votes. The only thing that would be missing from this scenario is the confirming email that was sent to the club secretary and club president, which prior to the 2021 virtual annual meeting, we never had anyway. So my action item is that the purchase of the click. Oh, well, you can read it. I can't make the motion myself.
Okay. Melanie?
Sharon needs to be promoted.
Thank you.
She's in as an attendee.
I'll make the motion. This is Kathy.
George will second.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, George. Okay, George.
Yeah, I know we're not exactly rolling in money right now, but I think this is a very wise investment. Trying to go to an online system, we're going to be at the mercy of people with a variety of different devices in the hall. There are going to be tech support problems. There are going to be people that for some reason or other the device doesn't work. It's going to be an ongoing cost. So between those 2 options, this one's preferable. In terms of a choice between this and the way we've always done it, with no disrespect to either our current president or a couple of past presidents that are sitting on the board, it's really hard when you're sitting down in the gallery and all the hands around you go up for one side of an issue and the president calls it for the other side of the issue. It breeds a certain amount of uncertainty among the delegation. I think more transparency, more accuracy would be worthwhile. I do think there are going to be more ongoing costs with this than anticipated. There are always unexpected costs. Devices are going to break, batteries are going to die. There's going to be a certain amount of ongoing maintenance on these. But bottom line is, I think this is a good investment. And as Aline already mentioned, this past annual, we had a lot of calls for a hand count of the delegates. This would not only give us more accuracy and make people more comfortable with the results, but it would also move the meeting along and make it a lot less tedious. You know, I find the hand counts are very problematic because president calls the vote, a bunch of people raise their hands, we call out the teller, somebody goes to the bathroom, somebody wanders back into the room. You're not even sure the second vote is the same as the first one. I think this will give our voting a lot more integrity. I think it will speed things up, and I just think it's a good investment.
Pam Delbar.
Having been one that sat there or stood there and made such determinations on votes, it actually is quite easy, as I think Mark can say, except for a couple instances. Kathy just showed us earlier today, you know, what we are lacking in registration money and in other aspects of our treasury. I just have a problem with $15,000 expenditure when raising your arm or two arms is no cost. This would be nice if all of a sudden we turn around and we are plush with money. I would rather see this going to clubs if we want to spend the money rather than going into hardware for our one annual meeting a year.
Carol?
Yes, I'm in favor of this. I think it's the clicker idea is a relatively low cost approach as opposed to doing a Wi-Fi thing. I think people like the idea of having a more accurate vote. It's very difficult to do a hand vote in such a large group. With our board, it's easier, but when you start to have several hundred people in a room, it's very difficult to determine what the actual vote is. Plus, when we start having to have a count by the credentials committee, the meeting basically comes to a halt until that is finished. So it delays things as well. I'm in favor of this. I think it would be a good investment for us.
Any other comments or questions? Kathy Calhoun, I believe you made the motion. Do you have any closing comments?
I think that it's money well spent. You know, in so many ways, we need to be current with current technology and accuracy. I think this certainly has been already called out. I get it. $15,000 for a once a year event is expensive, but I think in this instance, I think this is money that we need to spend, and I think it would serve us well.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna call for the vote because there may be possible no votes. So if you're in favor of this, please raise your hand. Okay, I have Melanie Morgan, George Eichenhauser, Mark Hannon, Carol Krasnowski, Annette Wilson, Mike Shelton, Paula Noble, Kathy Dunham, Yukiko Hayata, Russell Webb, Rachel Anger, Kathy Calhoun, John Kalila, Sharon Roy. Lower your hand. If you are opposed, raise your hand. John, did you already vote yes?
I did, sorry.
Thank you. Opposed, Pam Delabar and Pam Mosier. Lower your hand. Any abstentions? Rachel, please announce the vote.
I do not have a vote from Kenny Curley.
Kenny, are you a yes or a no?
I'm, oh. I see him on the call, but he's on mute. So that'll be 14 yes, 2 no, 0 abstentions, and 1 did not vote.
Okay, the motion passes.
Thank
Colleen,
you, everybody. Nope, I'm done. Thank you.
you are done?
Mhm.
Okay.
Joe, I was a yes. I'm sorry I had to move a vehicle.
Okay, Kenny, thank you.
Got you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Eileen, for your report and taking us through everything. Next is marketing. And do we have Desiree?
No, it's supposed to be me.
Oh, okay. I'm
I
sorry.
submitted the report. Desiree is in Pasadena, California at the CatCon grouping today. She's hoping to do a lot of networking, and hopefully she'll find a couple sponsors for us while she's there, which will make Mrs. Mosier very happy. This is a committee that's been very active for a number of months now. We meet once a week with Atomic Wash, which is the agency we hired to help us with branding and eventually with the revamp of the website. We meet once a week with them, and we're doing a lot of work in between the meetings. So you can see that all 4 of the committee members are very, very active, and we're also very enthused. We're really excited about the branding changes that we're making. I have no action items, but I want to encourage everyone in the audience to join us on the 11th of October, which is a Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time, where we're going to have a town hall meeting where we roll out a lot of the changes that we're making to our branding, which will include the new logo, the new tagline, and a number of other ideas that we have. That's all I have.
Anybody have any questions or comments for Mark? Okay, thank you, Mark. Next item on the agenda is the IT report. James?
James, you're on mute.
I clicked the button, I swear. All right, thanks, Rich. The report should bring you up to speed on everything that's going on. I will expand on the genetics. Paul Patton was here for a day in central office and spent some time with those staff and us talking about genetics in general. We did get to speak to him about the genetic programming a little bit, and he had some good feedback. Lorraine Shelton also was here running the museum for a week. I think she'll be back here in October again. And she also proved invaluable for a resource on the information and some feedback. Paul, Steve Merritt, Aline, and I, and Jeremy, our developer from Sonnet, we had a meeting earlier last week to go over the genetics programming and try to form a plan of what adjustments we could make. We were able to identify a key issue in that discussion, and that had to do with what we call wildcards, which, if you're familiar with like doing web searches where you're not sure about something, you can use a wildcard character that will pull in all possible pieces of information. And that was kind of a root cause of one of the issues we discovered. So Sonnet has made some programming changes. They made those at the end of the week. Steve Merritt is helping us go through and make adjustments to the data, because the changes we made meant that the data that we used to feed the genetics also had to be edited. And we're talking, thousands of colors. We're just doing one, we're just doing this testing for one breed. I think it's the exotics, which is what we were using for some of our test litters. So Steve's working through those colors right now. He's hoping to have that data kind of cleaned up next week. Then we can do another phase of testing on that. We're pretty confident it's gonna impact our results, pretty majorly. So we're heading in the right direction finally on this. The CSU 2022, as you see there, I kind of laid out some ideas or plans of where we're going for ECAT side of things. We've always envisioned ECAT as being a central hub for a lot of activities with managing your cats, and we're talking about even show entries with the online with the centralized entry clerk. and certain things like that. So if anybody has any questions about kind of what we've laid out there, I'd be happy to take any questions. Otherwise, that's everything.
Anybody have any questions for James? Very good. James, great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is clerking program. John, are you going to do that?
Yeah, notice that Bethany have submitted the test results in the spreadsheet that you guys had all to take a look at it. There's a lot of requests about a clerking school. Bethany's holding a virtual Zoom clerking school on the 30th this month. Anybody can enter in the world. So hopefully that will help the clerking situation. Any questions? I guess that's it.
Pam Delabar?
Yes,
John,
ma'am.
what time does the clerking school start?
Hold on 1 second. I gotta. It was on Facebook. She posted today.
Pam, what I have is 10:30 a.m.
Yes, to 5 p.m.
Eastern time.
Yes. It's on a Sunday.
Kathy Calhoun, do you have a question for John?
No, just, and I know you'll do this, John. We'll get the ID people. The link, so
Anybody.
those who can, yeah, but we just need to make sure that we get the link out to them.
Oh, yeah. They have to send Bethany a request to get them on because we have to charge and cover the cost. $15.
So let's get all that information to the ID group.
Okay.
Any other questions for John? Okay, thank you, John.
You're welcome.
The next item we have is experimental format. Sharon?
Oh, hello. Okay. We just have a couple of quick, well, I don't know, hopefully they'll be quick, proposals. And I also sent out the two for the two shows in the greater Baltimore area that are coming up that also want to do the OCP ring. So Kathy Dunham, do you want to talk about your club first? That's the first one that came up.
Kathy, before you start, I just want to warn the board. We are going to stop this discussion at 3:30 to do the appeal agenda item. So go ahead, Kathy.
Yes, I have a club in my region, Show Me Cat Fanciers. Their show is December 10th. They would like to hold an OPC ring concurrent with one of their already existing rings in their one-day show. I believe they have already talked with Kenny Curley about doing that because he has been part of this ring in the past, and he is familiar with how it will operate. So they would like to grant an exception to show rule 4.06 and allow Show Me Cat Fanciers to include one open champion, open premier ring at their one-day show on December 10th.
Kathy, seconds.
Okay, thank you. Mark Hannon?
Yeah, I participated in one of these rings a couple of weeks ago. Kenny was the judge and I was the clerk. This was envisioned initially for the international show, which would be a large event. Unfortunately, what happened at the show that Kenny judged and I clerked, in premiership, there were no opens or premieres in the long hair class. In the short hair class on Sunday, thanks to absentees and transfers to Grand, there were only 8 cats present for a top 10. And I just don't think this format lends itself to the smaller shows where virtually every cat entered got extra Grand points.
Annette?
Thank you. Yeah, I have that same concern, but mostly this actually isn't an extra ring. This is just handing out additional awards in an existing ring, correct?
Correct. No.
Okay, I just want to make
No,
sure
it's
these
not
kids.
correct. What they did in Florida was they brought in 2 extra judges and had 2 extra rings. What they did in Maryland was, instead of handing out top 3 or top 2 in premiership, they handed out top 10. So it was just one final. But in Florida, it was 2 finals.
I understand. I'm talking about this particular proposal.
Annette, you are correct. For this particular proposal, it would be handled like Maryland was handled when they had an existing judge do the ring. It is not an extra ring.
Yeah, I think that should be clear. It's not actually a ring. It's more points. It's
right.
A gift.
Yes.
Can I ask another question?
Go ahead.
Okay, did we ever talk about putting a minimum number of cats entered in the category in order to do this?
Eileen, do you know the answer to this question?
I'm sorry, what was the question again? Because I was looking for something else. What was your question?
And the question was,
The answer is no.
Okay.
No? Okay, thank you.
Because I had a question.
Annette?
Thank you.
Are you done?
I'm done.
Okay, go ahead, Eileen.
Under proposal 1, it says the judge officiating in this ring would not be able to judge a regular ring in the show. Is that? I don't know.
That's, Aileen, that's not the one that, oh, sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
Go
That's,
ahead, Sharon.
that's okay. We're still talking about the Show Me Cat fanciers. We haven't.
Oh, got it. I'm sorry. Never
That's
mind.
okay.
Okay, are there any, Pam Mosier?
Okay, I'm kind of confused on this. And so going back to what Mark was saying, so what is the, I mean, I like what Annette was saying, that maybe there should be a limit. There should be a minimum in order to do this, because does it just, are you just picking up, giving people extra points? I mean, what's the concept here?
That is what it is.
Just giving people extra points. So shouldn't there be a minimum? I think there should be a minimum. I mean, this is carrying things, I think, a little bit too far.
Okay, Kathy Dunham, do you want to respond to Pam Mosier's request for a minimum as well as Annette?
Well, I have no problem with a minimum, but I will say this. If we are asking clubs to get these approvals before their show closes, they don't know if they're going to meet the minimum. But if they want to try it, they have to have the board say, okay. So if we're going to put minimums in, you know, they've already ordered or will conceivably have already ordered rosettes and those things, and they're going to lose those costs if they don't meet the minimums. So that's kind of a double-edged sword from my perspective. I understand the concept that Pam and Annette are talking about, but if we have to approve these 90 days out or 60 days out, the clubs don't know if they're going to meet a minimum standard to be able to host the show. But in the meantime, they've already ordered the rosettes to be able to provide that format, and it's already been advertised. So I don't know. I understand the concepts and I understand the theory. I just think putting it in practice is going to be difficult.
Okay, I just want to remind the group, it is now 3:24. Sharon?
First of all, I just had a text from Kenny. He says he's not, he's
I'm
out of
back
the
now.
meeting.
I'm
You're
back
back now, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, first of all, it was first done in Florida the other way, and the Florida way was a really nice way to do it, but it's expensive because you have to bring in a couple extra judges to do it the way they did it at the regional in Florida. For the amount of extra grand points that 10th best cat in premiership got, or the 8th best cat in premiership got, as opposed to the goodwill of doing one ring where more champions or premiers final. I don't agree necessarily without putting in a minimum until we see how quickly this is adopted. I agree with Kathy Dunham. It's a two-edged sword because you don't know if you're going to have enough, what you're going to get for entries.
Nat?
Thank you. I'll be quick. They could come to us with that as part of their proposal, subject to this many entries in premiership and this many entries in championship. I mean, I understand all of that, but that should be part of their proposal then. I can't vote. I'm not going to vote for this. We have no idea yet how this is affecting cats granting faster. And hopefully, if we can get clubs to be more reasonable about these requests, maybe even bring it back tomorrow. I don't know if you can do that and get in touch with them, but I think we need to. This is just an open-ended thing, and I can't support it.
Kenny?
I'll make this quick too. We just started this. We've only had 2 shows. Let's give it some time, see how it works out. If anything, it's going to promote more goodwill than it's going to hurt anything. It's not going to make cheaper grants. There's still cats defeated. To me, it makes no sense not to continue to try.
Mark?
As Kathy was talking about, the club wouldn't know ahead of time, the exhibitor wouldn't know ahead of time. I don't know how this is any different than top 15s. People that enter the show hoping for a top 15, they don't know for sure there's going to get the numbers.
Melanie?
I really like the idea of a minimum. I like the idea of encouraging the clubs, but now that the minimum's been brought up, I can't quite unsay that in my head. And much like we used to have top 5, if you had X number of entries, I think that this should only come into play if you have 25 or more champions or whatever, 15 or more premiers.
Yeah, I'm going to stop the discussion on this. I'm going to ask a question to Kathy Dunham and Kathy Calhoun. Do you want to table this till tomorrow, bring it back up, or do you want me to call for the vote? Kathy Dunham?
Let's table it and I will talk to my club.
Kathy Calhoun, you in agreement?
Yes, I'm in agreement.
Great. We're tabling it till tomorrow. Sharon, we're going to have to come back to the rest of your items under this agenda item. We now need to prepare to get ready to move into the appeal because I believe if we go further, we're just going to go beyond. So let's switch gears and go on to the appeal. And Kelly, you're going to handle that. And Aline, I think you need to bring the people in to be brought forward.
Is this open session?
It was requested in open.
So just so you know that all of the materials are available and ready to be considered with or without a party making a statement.
My suggestion is, since one party is here, let him make a statement. And that'll give the other side a few more minutes to show up. And if they haven't shown up by then I think the motion is to close the hearing, and then we can discuss what we're going to do when we get to closed session.
Kelly, do you agree that the party that's here should make a statement?
Yes, the party that's here is welcome to make a statement if they wish. Go ahead, Mr. Goldman. Do you have any additional statements or materials that you wish the board to consider?
Well, first off, I want to thank the board for allowing me to make a statement, and I'll make it brief. This has been, and Charlie, you know this has been a communication back and forth where she would do additional material, Ms. Juan, then we would respond and would go back and forth. So I don't know what additional there is. I'm going to make it as quick as I can. The communication, it's more than just communication. It got down to really difficulty of her changing her statements a lot. Trying to get to excuse me 1 minute, I'm looking at my notes. The health certificate. Okay, she gave us a false health certificate. It had the wrong microchip number. It was she gave me an additional one and with no explanation. And we asked her what the deal was and we never got an answer. Then the protest, the third thing is it was false. And that's the first time we've heard that it was false, but I think that's a pretty serious violation right there. And as you know, we've given certificates from a veterinarian that the cat has a health issue, permanent, one where it prohibits us from breeding, which is why we bought the cat. And the vet's whatever, her knowledge or whatever, her licensing. It's been a really difficult situation. The pictures we sent evidence that the pictures that she sent and the video was not right. And then she's even took videos. We took snapshots of the one when the transporter left, and you can clearly see it's not the same. She's touched up the pictures. And then she made a comment about us with the transporter. We had nothing to do with it. We never talked to him until he dropped the cat off. We didn't pay him. I mean, we paid him when he came out, but we didn't have any communication with him whatsoever. So, and she made those false statements. So she's made a lot of false statements. I understand there's a language barrier, and I understand there are two sides to the story, but it got just being insulting. So I think all the evidence is there. I don't have anything additional other than what I just, again, I thank the board for their consideration.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Goldman. Shelley?
Thank you. I think that that includes the evidentiary portion of the appeal. We would go ahead and proceed to consider and deliberate in closed session. And so that concludes the open session portion of this, and we can take up the additional information. If the board would like, there is substantial additional information in File Vista than was originally considered by the protest committee that the board has available to review.
Thank you, Shelley. George?
Shelley, would it be appropriate for the board to actually make a formal motion to close the hearing, to conclude the hearing?
I don't know that you need a formal motion to conclude the hearing, but there's no reason you can't. Why don't you go ahead and do that?
Then I'll make the motion. I'll make the motion.
And I'm going to go ahead and leave, guys, so you guys can do what you need to do. Again, we thank you for your time and consideration very, very much. And as a member of CFA, we appreciate you guys so much. You're doing such a great job. And I just want to thank you for the time and effort you guys have put into this association.
Thank you again, Mr. Goldman.
Yeah,
Mr. Goldman, you may go now.
Yeah, just to nail down any loose ends, I move we conclude the hearing, the open session portion of the hearing.
May I have a second, please?
Kathy seconds.
Thank you, Kathy. Any discussion? Any objections? Motion is passed unanimously. We will do the deliberations in closed session. Shelley, thank you. We're going to go back to Sharon Roy on the experimental format. Sharon, let's go back to where you left off.
Okay, I've just texted Dave and Sarah, so the question about minimums for the OCP will bring up his two proposals tomorrow when I hear back from Dave. Well, along with Kathy's, if that's okay with everybody.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. The other one, the proposal one, this is something a little different, and I do want to thank actually Mary Kay and Omar Gonzalez for helping me with this when we came up with the idea to make sure we weren't violating any show rules. And this is just kind of following, except allowing some points, but kind of following in the breed summit. We have a lot of breeds that just don't have enough to really have a real summit. So this is combining like breeds together. We're going to do a special ring if approved at the Norwegian Forest Cat Show. The first will hire us. We're going to have an 8-ring show. We'll hire a 9th judge, and the judge in one session will just do all the Maine Coons, Norwegian Forest Cats, and Siberians, and then in the other one we'll do all the Bernese related breeds. But basically they're all going to be judged together, The top 10 final may be kittens, cats, and premiers. That's basically what it is. They will be getting regional points based on the number of cats that are entered. And any cats that are in the top 10, not in breed, but any cats in the top 10 that are champions will get the appropriate number of champion points as well. Grand champion points, I should say, as well. That's all. And so that's the explanation of it, to be allowed to do it. And the second one is to allow National Norwegian to put on that format.
Sharon, that's your motion.
That's my motion.
May I have a second, please?
Russell seconds.
Thank you, Russell. Open for discussion. Pam Delabar.
I love it. I think it's a great idea. In fact, many years ago, Dick Gebhardt and I had talked about having special groupings like what we see with category 1 being the Persians, exotics, and 2 being the semi-long hairs, 3 being the short hairs, heavy-bodied short hairs, or heavier bodied short hairs, and then 4 being the Oriental Siamese type cats. And I think this really can be competitive and should be a real draw for breeders. I'm all for it.
Melanie.
I'm strongly in support of experimental breed-oriented type activities and rings, and I really like the concept here. Although the fact that we're basically taking this a step further and actually assigning points. In the past, when we've asked for Breed Summit type of approvals, it's been for awards within that show for this particular breed, best of the best, et cetera, but we have not given them any additional points. So that's kind of something that I want to point out, that we're opening a new part of Pandora's box here on this. I'm not sure that's good. I'm not sure that's bad. I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it. I do love the direction this is going and the idea behind it. But I'm having a little bit of trouble wrapping my head around the fact that we'll actually be giving those particular cats, you know, an extra opportunity at points, et cetera. So.
Does anybody want to comment on Melanie's potential concern? Pam Delabar.
Many years ago, we used to have the Japanese Bobtail Club in the Dallas-Fort Worth area do a specialized ring for Japanese bobtails, and they got points. So this is not a new idea, even though these were long hair, short hair Japanese bobtails at that point in time. But I still remember as a short hair judge, this was one of the first things I got to judge. And it was really quite an affair, and lots and lots of entries. So I would expect, especially with seeing the Norwegian Forest Cat Club sponsoring this, I would expect a good amount of Maine Coons and Norwegians, and I'm sure the Siberian people might be excited about this type of thing too.
Annette.
Thank you. I have a question about proposal 1, where it says the included classes will be judged together and scored together for national and regional points. Do you mean the kittens, champions, and premier are all judged and ranked once? In other words, your best kitten could be your best cat in this category, or that's not clear to me.
Yes, in the top. Yes, your best and second best of breed could be a kitten, it could be a champion, it could be a premier. And in your top 10, you could have any of them in your top 10.
Okay, so that dilutes the points a little bit, I guess.
It does.
But I tend to agree with Melanie. This is different from what we've done before. And I guess what I'm thinking is, for some of the breeds where there's larger amounts of competition, this could be an issue. Lots of Maine Coons, right? Lots of Persians, if they wanted to do one, Persians and exotics, and pretty soon they could be skewing points for the show. On the other hand, I think it might be worth trying. The only other issue I had is top 10 if greater than 15 or more are entered. That's basically, you're just ranking cats. And I guess that's my concern. You're basically, if 15 are entered and 3 are absent, you got 12 cats, kittens, premieres, and championship. And so you're gonna rank 10 of them.
Correct.
I don't mind the ranking, but that best cat or kitten is then gonna get, is it only gonna get kitten points, or is it gonna get national points for beating all those cats, which are premieres and champions also?
It's going to get points for beating champions and premieres.
Yeah, that's a stretch for me. I mean, I get it, it's competition, but it's a stretch for me.
Sharon?
I was just going to echo what Pam Delabar said before. Many, many years ago, when we used to have a lot of Tonkinese, we actually had a Tonkinese only ring that was scored for regional and national points. So, yeah, it has happened before.
Okay, Melanie?
Great. I appreciate that history from Pam and Sharon, and that makes me feel a little better because I really do like the idea here. My question is for Eileen in central office. Is this an issue for scoring?
All of these experimental formats are an issue. Yes. We manage. They're all hand scored. It's not just the hand scoring. It's then working within the data entry into the system to record all of those. You know, we can't just hand score it and add the points. Doesn't work that way. We have to be concerned if it's an additional scoring, is it not additional scoring? Is it national? Is it grand? So yes, they're an issue.
So Eileen, is there, if it's an issue, is there a chance of errors?
No.
Okay.
Charlie's very good at what she does.
Okay. Pam Mosier?
Okay, from what Annette said, now I'm confused. So are you saying that if you're putting all these together, so you're having champions, you're having premieres, and you have kittens. Okay, are you just getting points from what's been defeated, or are you getting points from all the kittens that are entered in the show and all the champions? Okay, I'm confused on that.
Sharon, do you want to respond?
Sure. Okay. Whoever the judge is, and we haven't hired a judge yet because we're waiting to be approved. The judge is going to judge all the Maine Coons. It's going to judge all the forest cats and all the Siberians. And then they're going to do a top 10 final. The top 10 final could be 5 kittens and 5 champions. It could be 10 premieres. You just never know. So that's the way it's going to be scored. And if there are any champions are in the top 10, they will get champion points. There's no champion points in breed. Does that answer your question, Pam?
So you're saying it's just cats, what was entered. If there's 15 Siberians entered, you're going to pick up the 15 points from those, right? Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, you're going to pick up the 15. Well, whichever one is in the top 10 or the top 10 would pick up points for all the Norwegians, all the Maine Coons, and all the Siberians.
Even though there could be kittens and premieres in there, you're still going to pick up those points?
You are.
Okay. I got a problem with that.
What? Okay.
Pam Mosier, do you want to expand on your problem or just leave it at that?
Well, it's just a problem because you're picking up points from, if you're a champion, no, when you said if you were a champion, you're only going to pick up for champions defeated?
Per champions defeated, not per cats defeated, per champions defeated.
Okay, so for a kitten, you're only going to pick up points for kittens defeated or kittens, or even if it's a champion or a premier.
If you were in the top 10, you are going to pick up points based on all the entries.
Okay.
Any cat that's in the top 10 is getting regional and national points if they're in the top 10.
Okay, that does, and that does.
If there's a champion in there, or a premier, they're only going to get whatever the champion or premier points that are available.
Right, but they're going to get national scored for the other, which concerns me.
Okay, Mark?
And my concern is that if all the cats in the top 10 are going to get national and I assume regional points. So if it's a kitten, it's going to pick up national and regional kitten points for champions and premiers that it defeated. And that's unique. We haven't been doing that before.
Yeah.
We've had situations where a cat was 25th, was only 1 point ahead of 26. And it could, the 26th best cat could move into 25th because it beat kittens that weren't kittens, that were championship and premiership cats. I have a serious problem with picking up national points on cats outside your competitive category.
M. Delabar?
Basically, we're looking at cats defeated. So overall, if you get your top 10. So if you get, let's say, 10 overall Maine Coons, 10 overall Norwegians, 10 overall Siberians, and you do a top 10 out of those 30 cats that are there and eligible, your, let's say your third best cat would be 90 points of that. That's 26 points. Now I realize that that could be a big deal at the end of the year for some people. I would hope it would not be all that much, but I can't see the consternation over these breed specialties being able to get points for cats defeated. So it's a competition. They're if they're in the final, then they've defeated the other 20 cats that were in this overall competition. To me, it's not a problem.
Annette?
Thank you. I know I'm taking up too much time, but overall, I like this idea, and it's what I thought we should do more frequently, have breed competition or breed group in this, but I don't think they should be scored for national and regional points. I'm okay with grand points. But I think putting the national and regional points in there, it's going to be a sticking point at some show at the end of the season, and people are going to cry it's unfair. I think this should encourage people to compete within, with their breeds for this kind of thing. I mean, I'd enter every cat in my house if the prizes were just candy bars. I'm good with that. It's the points, the national and regional points I'm having trouble with.
Any other questions or comments? So real quick, I've been real cautious in sharing my comments and thoughts. I've asked some questions, but I've been holding back on my comments. On this one, I will just say the idea might be a good idea, but I believe what you're doing is unleveling the playing field. And unleveling the playing field is going to end up with unintended consequences, and the board's going to be dealing with some issues in the future if this is what's going to happen. So I do share same concerns about the national and regional points, and this may need some work. So those are just my comments. Melanie?
Sharon, would you consider amending this to take out the national and regional points? Because I know that I, for one, would wholeheartedly support this. I mean, I may support it with the points, but I think you would have a much better chance of having it pass.
I have to think about this.
Okay, while you're thinking about it, Annette?
Yeah, I would definitely support it without the national regional points. Plus, if clubs would do this, we could then look back and see what impact it would have had there been national regional points applied. And it would keep central office from having to score it at the time. But we could go back and look and see what effect would it had we scored this top 10 or that top 10 for national regional points. That's all.
Melanie?
Rich, I'm sorry to keep talking, but we've done this before to some extent. Not as sophisticated as this idea is. I like this idea even better than ours. But I can tell you, speaking from experience with the Egyptian mouse, that just competing for that best of the best little gem that we give out and the rosettes at the end of the day We had over 30 Egyptian mouths at our last breed show. People will respond and enter cats for breed-related activities without points, and we weren't asking for points. I'm not sure. I mean, I'd be more than happy to ask for points next time this comes up and around, which I think is, I'm not necessarily sure. Like I said, I'm on the fence about whether it's yay or nay on that. But I just think it complicates this particular issue here. And I think that the breeds really can respond just for the candy bars that Annette had mentioned, or ice cream.
Mark?
I don't think you can go back and look at it historically and say what would happen if we had scored it, because had you scored it, cats might have entered that would not otherwise have entered. So you're basing it on a different entry. My suggestion to Sharon would be to have a vote on this, what she proposed, and if it fails, then come back with a second motion without the scoring.
Okay.
That's fine. Oops, sorry.
Pam?
Delabar or Mosier?
Pam Delabar, I'm sorry.
Without any points, kittens, especially Maine Coon, Norwegian, and Siberian kittens, really do not have a reason to enter. One, we're looking at 3 breeds that take a while to mature. So the kittens are starting at a disadvantage unless they are just absolutely stunningly wonderful. But you know, your Norwegians and your Siberians are well known for taking up to 5 years to mature out. So you know, there's got to be something for the kittens. I really don't see a problem with points right now.
Okay, Sharon, do you want to proceed, or do you want to amend your current motion?
Let me raise my hand here. Let's proceed with this, and if it doesn't pass, then we'll look at option 2.
Okay, very good. I'm going to call the vote. If you're in favor, raise your hand. George Eigenhauser, Russell Webb, Kenny Curley, Mike Shelton, Pam Delabar, Kathy Dunham, Sharon Roy, Melanie Morgan, Paula Noble, Kathy Calhoun, Rachel Anger, Yukiko Hayata. Lower your hand. If you are opposed, raise your hand. Pam Mosier, Annette Wilson, John Kalila, Carl Kuznowski. Lower your hand. If you are an abstention, raise your hand. I see no abstentions. Rachel, please call the vote.
I don't have a vote from Mark Hannon.
I was a no.
That's 12 yes, 5 no, 0 abstentions.
Okay, the motion passes. Hey, Sharon.
Okay, the second one is just to allow National Norwegian to try this format at their February show. And the one thing is that it would be a 9th judge that is only going to judge those classes. They're not going to be allowed to judge a regular ring at the show.
Okay, in a second.
I'll second Russell.
Okay, thank you, Russell. Discussion, Melanie?
So Sharon, if this passes, does that mean you'll have an extra ring?
Yes.
If so, could we talk about there being a handling beta test there?
Absolutely, because there'll already be a ring there and it'll be
okay.
It'll be done earlier, absolutely, and be there on Sunday.
Any other comments? Are there any objections to this? Okay, there's an objection, so I'm going to call for the vote. If you're in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. I have Mark Hannon, George Eigenhauser, Melanie Morgan, Russell Webb, Kenny Curley, Kathy Dunn, Pam Delabar, Mike Shelton, John Kalila, Rachel Anger, Carl Kuznowski, Yukiko Hayata, Sharon Roy, Paula Noble, Kathy Calhoun, Pam Mosier. Lower your hand. If you are opposed, raise your hand. I don't see anybody opposed. If you're an abstention, raise your hand. Annette Wilson. Okay, Rachel, please call the vote.
That's 16 yes, 0 no, 1 abstention.
Motion passes. Okay. Annette, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I have a question. So that experimental format that passed, is it possible to do that? Could a club do that and say they don't want to award national, regional points?
Absolutely. Oops, sorry.
What was the answer? I'm sorry, I didn't hear it. Sharon?
So could a club ask to do the experimental format without national and regional points? Without awarding national and regional points for the experimental group?
Sharon Roy, do you
Yes.
want to answer that?
Yes, and so then it would be very much like the breed summit. We could give like best and second best breed and best champion, but it could be under multiple breeds, but not do any.
Okay, thank you.
George?
If a club is not going to give out the points, I think they need to put that in the show flyer, because if the default for the experimental format is to score it, if they're going to vary from the default, it should be disclosed.
So Sharon, based on the motion that was passed, it says all cats in the finals will be scored for national and regional points. Do we need a motion to make it optional?
I'll make that motion to make it optional in the future. Yes.
Okay,
Can we add to that motion that if they opt out, it should be disclosed in the show flyer?
Yes. Yes, George.
okay, and second, please.
George will second.
Russell.
I think it was George, but I'm gonna go
Okay.
with George, sorry. Kathy Cahoon?
So what level of complexity is this going to layer on for a central office to figure out who's clubs in and who's clubs out?
Well, it's not a matter, they just have to tell us that actually, we're going to be checking on any of these because frankly, I'm not exactly clear on what we'll be doing with these shows until we get them in and we see the paperwork that we have. And then we figure it out. And I may be in touch with Sharon Roy. We will have to touch base with the show and see. That's a good thing about, the option of national and regional points. And the one thing that I would mention now is that should we move forward with having experimental formats as a permanent thing, that we settle on one experimental format. And the reason I say that is because doing the manual adjusting, perhaps determining points depending on what format's being used, is really not something that we should be doing going forward, and it's something that we should program for. But programming for a variety of experimental formats would be cost prohibitive.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Any objections to the optional motion? Seeing no objections, this motion passes unanimously. Okay, Sharon,
No.
you have anything else?
No, just the ones we're going to bring back for tomorrow with a limit in the OCP.
Okay, we're bringing that back tomorrow.
Correct. I'm waiting to hear from Dave and Sarah.
Okay. And I believe, thank you, Sharon. I believe we are all done for the day in open session. It's
I have a
4:06.
question.
Go ahead, Mark.
Regarding the one that Sharon wants to bring up tomorrow, my understanding is it's a 6x6. Do we really want to entertain tomorrow, allowing 2 extra rings for opens, champions, and premiers when we've already got 12 rings?
Oh, wait a minute. I'm gonna raise my hand here.
Go ahead, Sharon.
Okay. Mark, it's not going to be 2 extra rings. It's going to be like it was a couple weeks ago, where one judge is just going to do a top 10 champion or top 10 premiers
Okay,
based on entries.
okay.
Thank you for clarifying that. Anything else before we adjourn? What I will ask the board is, do we want to start, close? Or we're going to start in 15 minutes. So you get a 15-minute break. We'll start back up at, let's say 4:25. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.